Aging is not the end, it's the awakening you've been waiting for. What if everything you've believed about growing old is wrong? What if aging isn't the slow fading of life's flame, but the moment it finally burns clear and true? In a world obsessed with youth, we're taught to fear wrinkles, hide gray hairs, and apologize for moving more slowly. We're told that after a certain age, we've passed our prime, that our worth is tied to what we can produce, solve, fix, or control. And as the years add up, many silently wonder, do I still matter? But Buddhism whispers a different story. It teaches that aging isn't something to resist. It's something to reverence. The later chapters of life are not a countdown, they're a deep calling to live more fully, more inwardly, more truthfully. They are the sacred season when noise gives way to stillness, and the soul, after a lifetime of striving, finally has a chance to speak. This isn't about survival. This is about transformation. In this reflection, we'll explore 6 simple yet life-changing elements that can turn aging from something we endure into something we cherish. They're not about turning back time. They're about stepping forward into a life of peace, dignity, and purpose. And this isn't just for those in their 60s, 70s, or beyond. This is for anyone who wants to prepare for the most meaningful chapter of life, not with fear, but with grace. So wherever you are on your journey, take a breath, open your heart, and let's rediscover what it really means to grow old, not just gracefully, but brilliantly. Part 1, A Purposeful Routine, the Foundation of Meaningful Aging. The power of rhythm in a season of stillness. As we age, something curious happens. The structure that once shaped our daily lives begins to dissolve. No more early alarms for work. No urgent deadlines. No school drop-offs, business meetings, or packed calendars. At first, it may feel like liberation, finally, the freedom to rest. But soon, many discover an uncomfortable truth. Without a sense of purpose, time begins to lose its meaning. What used to be ordinary, getting dressed, preparing a meal, walking to the mailbox, now feels empty. The hours stretch, and so does the silence. That silence can be peaceful or suffocating. In Buddhism, the Buddha speaks often about the nature of the present moment. He calls us to be mindful, yes, but not just to be. He calls us to live with intention. In fact, one of the core teachings in the Noble Eightfold Path is right intention, living not reactively, but consciously, with inner clarity and direction. And what is a routine, really? It's not about busyness. It's about creating a rhythm that reminds you who you are, every single day. The story of Ruth, from emptiness to meaning. Let me return to Ruth, an ordinary woman with an extraordinary inner journey. After retiring from a life of service as a teacher, Ruth felt an unfamiliar stillness settle over her days. No children to guide, no lesson plans to write, no students to inspire. At first, it felt like well-earned rest. But soon, she began waking up with a hollow ache in her chest, a sense that time was passing, but she wasn't really living. Eventually, Ruth realized something profound: freedom without direction becomes a trap. So she decided to start small. Each morning, she brewed a cup of tea, slowly, deliberately. She began journaling, not to record achievements, but to reflect on her feelings, her memories, her hopes. She planted herbs in a small garden box and cared for them daily. These weren't chores. They were acts of presence. Her life didn't become busier. It became more meaningful. Ruth's story is not unique. So many of us, especially after retirement or the loss of a partner, face this same inner question: now that the world no longer demands my time, what will I do with it? The answer isn't to fill time with noise. It's to fill it with intention. Buddhist insight: doing is a form of being. In many Buddhist monasteries, daily life is guided by a precise and deliberate routine. Monks rise before dawn. They meditate, chant, sweep the grounds, cook, study, and walk, all in quiet awareness. These tasks are not just obligations. They are forms of meditation, each action becoming a thread that weaves peace into the fabric of the day. Why do monks sweep the same floors every day? Because it's not about cleaning the floor. It's about cleaning the mind. A purposeful routine transforms repetition into ritual. And ritual, in Buddhist terms, is a vessel for awakening. Modern reflection, the lost art of slow living. In today's hyperconnected world, many people fear stillness. We're so used to productivity as proof of worth that when retirement or age slows us down, we feel unmoored. But maybe slowing down isn't the problem. Maybe the problem is forgetting how to be present inside our days. What if washing a dish became an act of gratitude? Preparing breakfast became a moment to bless the day ahead? Watering a plant became a reminder that life, even in its simplest form, responds to care? Purpose doesn't have to mean writing a book or volunteering full-time. It can mean giving attention to what you're already doing and letting that attention become sacred. Your routine is your refuge. Here's a gentle practice. Tomorrow morning, before checking your phone or turning on the TV, sit for 5 minutes in silence. Ask yourself, what do I want to give this day? What do I want to receive from it? Then, build your day around a few small, intentional actions. Make your tea slowly and drink it without distraction. Write 3 lines in a journal about what you noticed today. Call someone, not for a reason, just to connect. Take a short walk and notice 5 beautiful things. Cook 1 meal with mindfulness, as if feeding your soul. These are not just habits. They are spiritual anchors. And over time, they bring you back to yourself, not the self defined by age or role, but the deeper self who lives quietly beneath the noise, waiting for a rhythm to come home to. Closing thought for part 1. The Buddha once said, what we repeatedly do, we become. So what do you want to become? Let your days, not your memories, define your life. Let your mornings be quiet declarations of dignity. Let your afternoons unfold with peace. Let your nights be closed with gratitude. And let your routine be the humble but powerful thread that weaves all the pieces of your later years into a tapestry of purpose. Part 2, Physical Vitality, Reconnecting with the Body as a Temple. More than muscles, your body is your first meditation cushion. As we grow older, our bodies change, and not always in ways we welcome. Joints ache, energy dips, strength fades. There are days when even simple tasks, climbing stairs, bending down, standing up, feel like challenges that weren't there before. But here's a shift in perspective that Buddhism offers. Your body is not your enemy. It is your teacher. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha reminds us that the body is a fragile jar, subject to aging, illness, and death. But that doesn't mean it is to be feared or ignored. Quite the opposite. The body, though impermanent, is also sacred. It is through the body that we breathe, walk, bow, meditate, and serve. The question isn't, how can I keep my body young? The real question is, how can I honor this body now, just as it is? Harold's story, the gentle return to movement. Harold was once a man full of vitality. A gardener, swimmer, lover of long mountain hikes. But after a minor stroke, he became cautious, sedentary, and slowly disconnected from his own physical self. He told himself it was just temporary, that he needed rest. But weeks turned to months, and inactivity began to steal his strength. Not just his muscle tone, but his spirit. Then one day, a friend simply asked, "Harold, would you walk with me? Just to the corner and back." Reluctantly, Harold agreed. The first steps were difficult, but each movement stirred a memory in his body, a memory of how it once felt to be alive, grounded, capable. That day, something shifted. He didn't return to hiking immediately. But he began stretching each morning, doing light resistance band exercises, taking brief walks after dinner. Little by little, his sense of agency returned, not because he regained all his strength, but because he regained connection. His body didn't heal his spirit. Reconnecting with his body was the healing. The Buddhist middle path, between neglect and obsession. In the Buddha's own life story, he lived both extremes, life in indulgent luxury as a prince, and life as an ascetic starving himself in pursuit of enlightenment. It was only after nearly dying of exhaustion that he realized the truth. The path to awakening lies in balance. We are not to worship the body, nor are we to abandon it. We are to care for it as a companion on the path, not because we want it to last forever, but because it houses our capacity to live, love, learn, and serve. In many monasteries, movement is integrated into spiritual practice. Walking meditation, mindful sweeping, carrying water, stretching before long sits, these aren't exercises for fitness, they are acts of reverence. They say, this body is here now. Let me treat it with respect. Rethinking physical vitality, it's not about youth. The media would have us believe that vitality means six-pack abs, yoga poses on beaches, and marathon medals. But in Buddhist philosophy, vitality is not about performance. It is about presence. If you can, stretch for 5 minutes in the morning. Walk slowly around your garden. Breathe deeply with awareness. Lift your arms with intention. Do Tai Chi in your living room. Then you are already practicing physical vitality. The point is not to return to what your body once could do. The point is to ask, what can I do with care today? Personal reflection, my grandmother's gentle strength. My grandmother lived until the age of 95. She never stepped foot in a gym. She never worked out. But every morning, she opened the windows to let in light. She walked slowly around the yard. She swept the porch while humming. She carried a kettle with grace. Her vitality wasn't loud. It was quietly radiant. She once told me, I don't move because I want to stay young. I move because my body deserves my presence. Those words have stayed with me, and they reframe everything. Your body is listening. What are you saying to it? Every time you stretch, you say, I still want to feel. Every time you walk, you say, I'm still part of this world. Every time you eat with care, you say, I choose to nourish this life. Every time you breathe deeply, you say, I am still here. So don't wait to be strong enough to start. Start now, wherever you are, with kindness. Practical gentle practices you can begin today. Morning stretch ritual, 5 minutes of gentle shoulder, neck, and back movements. Walking with awareness, even 10 steps outside can be grounding. Focus on the feel of the earth beneath you. Chair yoga, modified movements you can do while sitting, great for balance and circulation. Loving touch, gently massage your feet, your hands, your face before bed. Say thank you. Sacred eating, eat slowly. Chew mindfully. Appreciate each bite. Closing thought for part 2. The Buddha never asked us to perfect the body. He asked us to be aware of it, to treat it as the vessel of awakening. So the next time you feel frustration toward your body for being slower, stiffer, or more tired, pause and ask, what if this too is holy? What if the slowness is not weakness, but invitation? Treat your body not as an old machine that's breaking down, but as an ancient tree, withered, wise, and still blooming in its own quiet way. You are not less because you are aging. You are more whole, more aware, and more sacred. Part 3, Emotional Connection, the medicine that touches the soul. Loneliness isn't just silence, it's the absence of being seen. There's a unique kind of emptiness that comes not from being physically alone, but from feeling invisible. In youth, we are surrounded by activity, family, careers, relationships. Our voices are heard, our opinions valued, our presence expected. But as we age, the noise quiets. The phone rings less. Friends move, children get busy, and suddenly, our once bustling lives feel like echo chambers. And slowly, this question begins to rise in the heart. Do I still matter to anyone? In Buddhism, one of the most powerful teachings is the Sangha, the spiritual community. The Buddha taught that we walk the path of awakening together. Even the most enlightened monks cannot thrive in isolation. Why? Because the human soul isn't designed to be separate. We are not meant to exist on islands. We are meant to be mirrors for one another's light. The story of Ruth continued reclaiming connection, one cup of tea at a time. Earlier, we met Ruth as she rediscovered purpose through a simple daily routine. But there was another, quieter ache beneath her days: loneliness. After losing her husband and watching her children drift into the currents of their own busy lives, Ruth found her house still and heavy. Not just with silence, but with the absence of being needed, of being heard, of being seen. Then one day, she noticed her neighbor, a young woman who had recently moved in, struggling to carry groceries. Ruth walked over, offered a helping hand, and invited her for tea. It was awkward at first. Small talk, polite smiles. But something shifted. That afternoon, in the warmth of her modest kitchen, surrounded by the scent of lavender tea, Ruth laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in weeks. That simple moment, the shared tea, the honest conversation, the eye contact, wasn't grand. But it was sacred. It reminded her. Connection doesn't require grandeur. It requires presence. Buddhist perspective, true connection comes from mindful presence. The Buddha spoke often about metta, loving kindness. It's not about dramatic gestures or deep relationships. It's about how you show up, moment by moment. To truly connect is to be fully here with another person. To listen without distraction. To speak with honesty. To offer your presence, not your solutions. Loneliness, in this light, is not a punishment. It's a signal that we've forgotten how to connect, or that we're waiting for others to make the first move. But what if you reached out first? What if you didn't wait to be invited, but became the invitation? Real life insight, my father's circle of silence and awakening. After my mother passed away, my father became a shell of himself. He would sit by the window for hours, watching the street, listening to the ticking clock. He rarely answered phone calls. His voice, once warm and booming, faded into murmurs. One evening, I asked him, "Are you lonely?" He looked at me and said, "Not lonely. Just forgotten." That night, I realized something painful. Loneliness is not just solitude. It's the feeling that your story no longer has a listener. So I began visiting him with my daughter every Saturday. We brought photo albums, played music from his youth, cooked together. Slowly, week by week, he came alive again. His voice returned. His eyes softened. His hands, once idle, began playing the piano again. He didn't need hundreds of people. He needed presence. And it changed everything. Ways to reignite emotional connection in daily life. You don't need a big social life to feel connected. You need real moments of heart-to-heart presence. Here are a few gentle practices you can try. Offer the gift of listening. Call someone and ask about their day. Listen without interrupting. Create rituals of connection. Weekly tea with a neighbor. A monthly video call with a distant friend. Share your stories. Younger people crave wisdom. Offer yours. Join a small group or community circle. Even online communities can provide a sense of belonging. Practice metta meditation. Send silent loving wishes to people you love, people you've lost, and even strangers. A thought to hold close. In the silence of growing older, your heart still whispers, "I want to be seen. I want to be held. I want to belong." The good news? You don't need to wait. You can offer that connection to someone else, and in doing so, you receive it too. Because here is the great secret of emotional connection. When you open your heart to another, you open it to yourself. Part 4, Mental Curiosity, Awakening the Inner Flame of the Mind. The mind never retires, unless we let it. There's a quiet danger in aging that few talk about, not disease, not loss, but mental stagnation. It creeps in slowly. Days blur into one another. You stop reading new things, asking questions, or solving problems. Conversations become repetitive. News feels overwhelming. Your world gets smaller. And soon, you start to believe that maybe, this is just what aging means. But Buddhism teaches something very different. The mind is not something that withers with time. It is something that expands, with care. The Buddha taught that all phenomena, including thoughts, are impermanent. This means the mind is never fixed. It is a flowing river, not a stagnant pond. And with intention, even in our later years, it can remain sharp, curious, vibrant, and awake. Leonard's story, the puzzle that opened his world. Leonard, an 83-year-old retired accountant, was once a master of complex numbers and quick decisions. But after retirement, his days slowed. He would wake late, sip coffee while watching TV, and flip through the same newspaper columns every day. At first, it felt restful. But soon, he found himself forgetting things, where he left his keys, names of people he'd just spoken to, words mid-sentence. He felt ashamed, afraid, and old. Then one birthday, his granddaughter gave him a book of crossword puzzles. At first, he rolled his eyes. "I'm too rusty for this," he joked. But she insisted. That evening, he picked up a pen, and something stirred. He didn't finish the puzzle, but he enjoyed trying. The next day, he tried again. He began to feel engaged, challenged, alive. From puzzles, he moved on to books he'd never read, documentaries on things he never studied, even a free online class about philosophy. His memory improved. So did his mood. But more than that, his curiosity returned. And with it, so did his sense of self. Mental stimulation isn't just for the young, it's for the living. There is a common myth that we only need to keep learning while we're working. But the mind doesn't stop needing nourishment just because the world stops demanding it. In Buddhist thought, the mind is likened to a lamp. If left unlit, it flickers out, not because it lacks fuel, but because no one tends the flame. Learning isn't a luxury. It's a form of spiritual maintenance. Mental vitality in aging doesn't mean memorizing capitals or doing algebra. It means keeping the spark of wonder alive. Curiosity is a path to wisdom. One of the Buddha's most iconic qualities wasn't that he had all the answers, but that he asked the right questions. What is suffering? Where does it come from? How can it be ended? These questions were not theoretical. They were existential, and asking them led to enlightenment. Likewise, your questions, however simple, can open doors. What happens if you try a new skill at 70? What would change if you read a novel in a genre you never liked? What if you started writing your memoir, even just one page a day? Mental stimulation doesn't mean chasing productivity. It means engaging with life in fresh, meaningful ways. Personal reflection, my aunt's second spring. My Aunt Lon, at age 78, shocked our entire family by enrolling in a beginner's painting class. She had never painted before. Never even doodled. When I asked her why, she said, "I spent my whole life cooking meals and paying bills. Now I want to see what else I'm capable of." She painted with the innocence of a child and the insight of a sage. Her work wasn't perfect, but her joy was radiant. Through her brushes, she expressed decades of love, loss, dreams, and rediscovery. She started late, but her mind blossomed in color. She taught me this. You are never too old to be new at something. Practical practices for mental vitality. Here are gentle, joyful ways to keep your mind alert, curious, and alive without pressure or performance. Read outside your comfort zone. Try poetry if you love history. Read sci-fi if you prefer memoirs. Stretch your brain. Solve puzzles, crosswords, Sudoku, logic games, or even trivia with friends. Start a question journal. Each day, write one question you don't know the answer to, and explore it. Learn something creative, drawing, photography, cooking new cuisines, writing a short story. Practice beginner's mind. In Zen Buddhism, this is the idea of seeing the world fresh, as if for the first time. It keeps the heart soft and the mind supple. Final reflection for part 4. You are not past your prime. Your prime is not a point on a timeline, it's a state of openness. So the question is not, what do I still remember? The question is, what am I still curious about? Your mind is a garden. It will grow weeds or wildflowers, depending on how you tend it. So choose wonder. Choose learning. Choose to be surprised by life, even now. Part 5, Self-Worth and Dignity, Remembering that you are still whole. When the world stops seeing you, you must learn to see yourself. There comes a time, often quietly and without warning, when we realize that we are being treated differently. People start speaking to us more slowly. They assume we need help, even when we don't ask. Some may talk over us or make decisions on our behalf as if we are no longer capable. It's not always cruel. Sometimes it's well-meaning. But the effect is the same. We begin to feel invisible. In a society that worships youth, productivity, and independence, aging is often viewed as a slow fade into irrelevance. But Buddhism offers a fierce and beautiful rebuttal. Your worth is not measured by what you can do. It is measured by who you are. Carol's story, reclaiming dignity after a fall. Carol, a 77-year-old former nurse, had spent her life tending to others. She was the strong one, the wise one, the rock. But after a fall that left her using a walker, she noticed something shift, not just in her body, but in the way people treated her. Her adult children began speaking to her in soft, cautious tones. Strangers assumed she needed help crossing the street. No one asked for her opinion anymore. Even at family dinners, she felt like a bystander. Carol didn't resent their care. What she missed was being treated like a person who still had something to offer. Then one morning, she looked at herself in the mirror, not quickly, not dismissively, but truly looked. She didn't see fragility. She saw resilience. Every wrinkle, every scar, every gray hair was not a sign of decay, but a record of strength. She remembered the nights she stayed up nursing sick children, the patience she held as they cried, the moments she kept going when everything felt too heavy. And in that moment, she whispered, "I am still me." That day, Carol stopped apologizing for needing support. She started speaking up again. She told her family what she liked and didn't. She offered advice with confidence. She even started mentoring young nurses through an online program. Carol didn't get her old life back. She reclaimed something deeper, her dignity. Buddhist insight, dignity is not given. It is realized. The Buddha never defined human value by youth, health, or status. He saw all beings as inherently worthy, simply because they were alive. He taught that within each of us lies a seed of awakening, a core of wisdom and compassion that does not diminish with age. In fact, age brings ripening. Just as fruit becomes sweeter over time, the aging heart becomes richer in experience, insight, and depth if we allow ourselves to see it. This is the paradox of aging. The world may begin to treat you as less than, but your soul has never been more ready. Your dignity is an inner fire. Dignity is not about pride. It is about recognition. Recognition of your journey, of your quiet victories, of your emotional scars and spiritual triumphs, of your humanity. When we speak of self-worth, it is not ego. It is remembrance. I am not defined by my mobility, but by my love. I am not defined by how quickly I think, but by the depth of my wisdom. I am not who I used to be, and that's a good thing. I have evolved. And this is a truth you don't need to prove to anyone. It is a truth you wear from within. Personal reflection, my grandfather's eyes. My grandfather was blind for the last 10 years of his life. Many people assumed he had become dependent, diminished, passive. But they didn't know what I knew. His blindness had only sharpened his presence. He listened more deeply than anyone. His words were chosen with care. His laughter was slow, but rich. And when he placed his hand on mine, I felt a dignity more powerful than any title or degree could offer. One day I asked him, "Do you ever miss being seen?" He smiled and said, "I may not see, but I am still someone worth seeing." Practices to reclaim and reaffirm your self-worth. Here are small but powerful ways to stay connected to your dignity. Mirror practice, look into your own eyes each morning and say something kind. Not flattery. Something true. Write your legacy. Start a list of the life lessons you've learned. They are sacred treasures. Share them. Stand your ground gently. If someone overlooks you or speaks over you, kindly but clearly speak up. You deserve to be heard. Dress for yourself. Wear clothes that make you feel beautiful, respected, expressive, not to impress, but to affirm. Meditate on worth. Sit quietly and repeat, I am enough. Just as I am. Closing reflection for part 5. You are not your walker. You are not your medication list. You are not your slower steps or forgotten names. You are a living archive of wisdom, grace, and strength. You've survived storms others haven't even imagined. You've loved. You've lost. You've risen again and again. Your dignity does not need to be earned. It simply needs to be remembered. So the next time someone treats you as less than, don't shrink. Don't disappear. Instead, soften your gaze, lift your chin, and let the quiet fire inside you speak without words. You are still here, and that alone makes you worthy. Part 6. The feeling of being needed, reigniting the spark of meaning. You don't have to be useful to be needed, you just have to be present. There is a kind of grief that comes not from loss, but from the quiet realization that you are no longer the center of someone else's world. Your children grow up. Your spouse may pass on. Your job retires you. The doorbell rings less often. The phone calls slow to a trickle. And one day, you sit in your living room, surrounded by photos and memories, and you wonder, does anyone still need me? This ache isn't about vanity. It's about meaning. The Buddha taught that life is rooted in interdependence. Everything in nature exists in relationship. A flower needs sunlight. A river needs a bank. A flame needs oxygen. And you need connection. Not because you are broken, but because you are human. Frank's story, how one child's drawing reawakened his purpose. Frank was once the cornerstone of his neighborhood. A father, a businessman, a handyman, a storyteller. People came to him for advice, for help, for comfort. But in his later years, after his wife passed and his children moved away, the house grew quiet. The doors stopped knocking. He began to feel invisible. He stopped shaving regularly. Meals became instant noodles. The days blurred. He felt useless. Then, one day, a knock at the door startled him. It was a little girl from next door, holding a drawing. Mr. Frank, she said shyly, I drew this for you. Can you tell me what you think? Frank smiled, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. It was a simple picture, a rainbow, a dog, a tree with pink blossoms. But what mattered was not the art. It was the invitation to be present. She wanted him to see her, to witness her, to be needed, not for something grand, but for something human. That moment changed everything. Frank began sitting on his porch more. He waved to neighbors. Kids stopped to talk. He started sharing old stories, teaching basic woodworking, offering quiet wisdom. And slowly, purpose returned, not because he became busy, but because he became available. Buddhist wisdom, giving is the deepest joy. In Buddhist teachings, dana, generosity, is not just a moral virtue. It's a spiritual path. The act of giving connects us to the present, to others, and to ourselves. But giving isn't always about money or service. Sometimes, it's your time, your attention, your presence, your wisdom. And the beauty of giving in old age is that it's not tied to hustle. It's tied to heart. You are still a vessel of stories, insights, perspectives, humor, presence. There is a younger person somewhere who needs exactly what you have lived through. You don't have to go looking for them. Sometimes, simply being open is enough for them to find you. Personal reflection, the day my elderly neighbor saved me. When I was 26, burned out from work and heartbroken after a failed relationship, I would walk around the block in the evenings, pretending I was fine. One day, my elderly neighbor Mrs. Thursday, who was always tending to her orchids, waved me over. She didn't say much. She handed me a cup of warm herbal tea and said, "Sit. You don't have to talk. Just sit." So I did. She never pried. She never gave advice. She just sat with me, 2 chairs in silence under a fading sky. That silent companionship did something no friend, no podcast, no therapist could offer at that moment. She didn't try to fix me. She simply showed up. And in doing so, she became my refuge. That night, I realized, you don't need to be strong to be needed. You just need to care. Simple ways to be needed without exhaustion. Being needed doesn't mean exhausting yourself. It means being available in your truth. Here are gentle ways to offer your presence to the world. Share a life story. Younger generations crave meaning. Offer yours. Call someone who might be lonely, a friend, a cousin, a neighbor. Ask about their life. Teach a skill, knitting, cooking, gardening, meditation. You know more than you think. Tend to something living, a plant, a pet, even a small garden. Life needs you. Be a listener, sit with someone, especially a younger person, and truly listen. It's rare and precious. A powerful reframe, you're not fading, you're ripening. So often we think of aging as a subtraction of energy, of status, of attention. But what if it's actually an addition? More stillness, more wisdom, more compassion, more time to offer presence. Being needed is not about becoming the hero again. It's about becoming the quiet light in someone's day. You are not a relic. You are a living teacher. Final reflection for part 6. At the end of life, what most people long for is not fame or wealth or applause. They long to feel that their presence meant something. So ask yourself today, herb who might need a kind word. Where can I show up with love? What part of my life can I offer, not to impress, but to heal? And most importantly, remember, you are still needed. Your story is still unfolding. And someone, maybe even someone you've never met, is waiting for the light you carry. Conclusion, aging is a return, not a retreat. Not slowing down, but deepening. We live in a world that treats aging like an ending, like a gentle closing of the curtain. But Buddhism reveals something very different. Aging is not a retreat from life. It is a return to what matters most. As youth fades, roles change, and the outer world grows quieter, a powerful opportunity arises to awaken inwardly. Where once there was rush, now there is reflection. Where once there was ambition, now there is awareness. Where once there was noise, now there is stillness. And in that stillness, there is truth. Let's remember the 6 truths we've walked through together. 1. A purposeful routine. Structure doesn't confine us. It liberates us from drifting. Simple, mindful habits become anchors of meaning, transforming ordinary days into sacred time. A routine is not about doing more. It's about living deeper. 2. Physical vitality. Movement is not just physical, it's spiritual. Every step, every breath, every stretch says to the universe, I am still here. I still honor this life. Treat the body not as a burden, but as a wise companion on the journey. 3. Emotional connection. We are not meant to age alone. Love, presence, shared silence, these nourish the soul more than medicine ever could. One heartfelt conversation can light a week of darkness. 4. Mental curiosity. The mind does not grow old. It grows bored. Curiosity isn't childish, it is the signature of a soul that is still alive. Stay curious, and you stay connected to life's mystery. 5. Self-worth and dignity. Your value doesn't decrease with your energy. It deepens with your years. The world may forget your name, but your spirit remembers your worth. You don't have to prove you matter. You already do. 6. The feeling of being needed. To be needed is to feel human again. Your presence, your story, your listening ear, all of it is a gift the world still aches for. You are not done. You are becoming more whole than ever before. This is not the end, it's the ripening. In Buddhism, impermanence is not a curse. It's a gift. It reminds us that life is not a straight line to decline, but a spiral toward awakening. The wrinkles on your face are the calligraphy of experience. The slowness in your step is the invitation to mindfulness. The quiet around you is the space where grace can finally speak. You are not less because you are older. You are more revealed, more refined, more essential. The fruits of your life are ready for harvest. The fire in your soul is ready to burn steady and warm, not loud, not wild, but with wisdom. What will you do with this chapter? You don't need to do anything dramatic. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You simply need to ask, what small act can I do with great intention today? Who can I connect with, even if just for 5 minutes? What part of me have I left dormant that's ready to awaken again? Final blessing. May your days ahead be slow and sacred. May your mornings begin with quiet joy. May your body move with kindness. May your words flow with meaning. May your heart continue to open again and again and again. And may you know, in your deepest bones, you are still here. And your presence still matters. Thank you for walking this journey. Thank you for living your years with grace.